In this video, we're going to show you to install the knock sensor on your Ford Focus located behind the intake manifold. Using our 19mm socket, we're going to loosen and remove the lug nuts. Grab that wheel, remove it, and set it aside. Now with the hood open, go ahead and locate your air filter box right here. Follow down to the air intake tube, and there is a vacuum tube right here connected to it. We want to go ahead and disconnect that. Now there's a little tab right here, a gray tab. You're going to push that over, and then wiggle this up and off, just like that, and just pop that over. Now I want to go ahead and separate and remove our intake tube here. You could use a 7mm or a flathead screwdriver on both of these clamps. We're just going to use a flathead screwdriver, most common tool available. Now you don't have to unscrew the clamp completely, but you do want to loosen it significantly. Going to wiggle this off. And we just tuck that off over here. Now we have this vacuum tube coming over here, and it goes down. Now you're going to locate this. There's going to be a little red collar on it. Now if you pull up on this, it's going to lock in, but if you simply take a flathead screwdriver, apply some downward pressure on that red lock collar and pull up, that allows you to pop that off there. Right here, you're going to locate your transmission dipstick. You want to pull this out, have a rag ready to go, and just wipe this as you take it out. And I'm going to set this right up on the wiper cowl. Let's remove our oil dipstick. Pull up, wipe this with your rag as you pull this out. Set it up on the wiper cowl. Now if you follow this vacuum hose down, it comes around to a 90-degree elbow, and it connects here to the lower portion right behind the throttle body. Now there's a blue clip on here. There's two tabs on either side, and you need to push those two down, unlocking this blue clip. So kind of push them out slightly and then push that clip down, and it's going to stop. It comes to a stopping point. Now on the left side between the two blue tabs here, and on the right side between the two blue tabs, there's push tabs. You have to pinch them. So you're going to reach down. I find it easier to use both pointy fingers here, push in and wiggle that hose off. If you follow the hose up, it comes to this little plastic retainer. Simple enough. Just pop it right out of that. You can swing this over as well, get that out of the way. Now across the front of the intake manifold here, we have this wiring harness that has a couple of retainers on it. I'm going to use my trim tool, and you want to pop these off. Now sometimes these little retainers break. It's not the end of the world, but they are old, brittle, and they've been subject to heat and cooling for many, many miles normally if you're doing this job. There's actually three of these connections. They just kind of fall it right down. Here we go. That'll be separated from the intake. Now just to the right of your transmission dipstick tube here is going to be this unit here. This is the electronic unit for your throttle body. Now there's a connector right here. There's a red lock tab on here. We're going to use our 90-degree pick to go right into that red lock tab and push it down. Ours is dirty, dirty. It's got all kinds of garbage in there, but it only comes down a little bit. Just pops down. Now we're going to press on this tab on the outside and pull that connector off. There's the red lock tab right there. So when we install this here, you make sure that red lock tab has to get pushed back up in to lock it into place. And we're going to continue to work our way down. We're going to move this harness out of the way. This is on the right side of the intake manifold. Follow it down, and there's a large gray connector right down here. There's a tab on the front of it. We want to push in on that tab and pull that gray connector off to the right. I can get my hand on there, but I can't pull that off, so I'm going to reach down with the other hand. I can push on that tab with one hand and push the connector off with the other. You don't want pulling those wires either when doing it, but there it is right there, that large gray connector. You can tuck that off to the side. Now on the left-hand side of the intake, again, we have our oil dipstick tube right here. You follow it over, and you're going to find a harness right here. Now normally this harness is clipped onto the intake manifold, but ours is not. You do want to go ahead and disconnect that from the intake manifold. Normally there's a plastic retainer of some sort. You can use a trim tool, a screwdriver, whatever you have to go ahead and just pop that free. On the left side of the intake manifold, you're going to locate that oil dipstick tube. You're going to follow it right down, and right down here is a bolt. We're going to have to go ahead, loosen and remove that. We're going to use an 8mm deep socket with our 1/4" ratchet to get in there, loosen and remove this bolt. We are going to be reusing this bolt here, so try not to lose it. There it is right there. Now we remove that bolt because we have to remove the oil dipstick tube from the engine. So you want to be careful when doing this here. We are going to go down underneath and spray this down with some rust penetrant and try and work that out from the bottom side of the engine from underneath. But we do want to make sure, if you're able to pop it out by just wiggling around, then great, you can do that. Ours is stuck, kind of expected on this vehicle because of the mileage. Now from underneath the vehicle, you want to go ahead and locate the splash shield here underneath the front bumper. And there's going to be a series of 8 screws, one on the inside of the fender liner here, and then a series underneath running across the front. Now it's easier to access this one here with the wheel removed. We're going to use our 7mm socket to loosen and remove these screws. And just continue this process right across the front. Now with all 8 of those screws removed, right across the center section, there's normally 3 plastic push pins right here. We're missing 2, but we have one here. We're going to show you how to get that out. Use your trim tool, and you want to pop out that center section. And once you get that out, you can remove the base. Now you want to repeat this process for the other 2. With all the hardware removed, we can go ahead and remove our splash shield. Now that we have the splash shield removed from underneath here, it's going to give us access to the base of our dipstick tube right here. We do have to remove the dipstick tube in order to remove the intake manifold. Now there's going to be a seam right here where the intake or the oil dipstick comes down to the base mount here. This does not come out of here, but the tube comes out of this base here. We went ahead and sprayed it down with some rust penetrant, and we took a flathead screwdriver and we gently started chipping away some of the rust here to get some mobility out of this. And we're gently working this out with our screwdriver underneath that flange. Here it is. There is a rubber O-ring on that, so you want to go ahead and inspect that, clean it, make sure that it is in still good condition. If not, you want to replace that before you install the tube. Now if you go right where the dipstick tube came out and you go straight up, well, we're going to find a 10mm bolt right here that's holding the lower portion of the intake manifold. So I'm going to use my 10mm shallow socket on my 1/4" ratchet. And let's see if we can loosen this here. Okay. We got it free. you should be able to reach up there and spin that out by hand. There it is right there. Now this wiring harness here runs down along and it comes across just the top of the starter and it's attached to the intake as well via a little plastic retainer. I'm going to use my trim tool, pop on in there and release that. It is a tight fit. Might take a couple different angles here to get in there and release that. Here we go. Actually, two hands just pop that right off. And just pull that harness off to the side. I want to go ahead and locate the bolts holding our intake to the cylinder head. The first one we're going to tackle is down here, right between the first two inside this V. There's one over here behind the throttle body, and then there's three across the top. Let's go ahead and get to it. I'm going to feed my extension and my socket down. Now these are 10mm bolts. So you're just going to use a 10mm socket. I'm going to use a long extension, and I'm just using my quarter inch ratchet. You don't need anything huge for doing this here. You can use a 3/8 if you want. Now these center bolts here that are inside can be a little complicated trying to get these out. I like to use a magnet to assist. Sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. So if you have a magnet to reach in there when you remove this bolt, it's great if you don't drop it. Now the next bolt we're going to get to is a little bit down low. It's right down here behind the throttle body. Spin this bolt out. You can use the magnet again here if you want to go ahead and pull that out. There it is. I'm going to grab this third bolt right here, up behind the throttle body with the upper portion. It's a nice, easy one to get to. Now if we come over here, we have the bottom portion of where the throttle body attaches to, and then we have a bolt right here. It's to the left of our transmission dipstick here. I'm running a shorter extension to get in here. Let's see if we can break this one free. All right, now that we have them broken free, I'm going to go ahead and spin that out. Now into the middle section here, we have our fuel rail, we have our fuel rail bracket, and down in between here, you can see that bolt right there. And then I'm going to come on down here. Now right over here is a connector we need to disconnect. This is the power steering pressure switch. Here's a power steering reservoir. It's just beside the intake manifold. Now this here, you're going to reach down and you're going to reach down in front of the connector and you're going to lift up and just pops out and then wiggle this out and off. Now that we have this connector off, our last bolt is down inside on the back side. We want to go ahead and get to that one. Let's go ahead and show you where that last bolt is. I'm going to feed this down inside. And there are two bolts here. You can see that rusty one on the left in the center of the screen, and then we have the other one. And this is the one that we want to get to. This one right up in here. All right, let's go ahead and get our socket on there. We're going to break that free and get this removed. All right, spin that bolt out there. Now I want to make note of some bolt size differences. There's two bolts that are longer than all the others on the intake. The only two that are longer are the ones that go here and here on your intake. They actually go through the metal shield for the fuel rail. So the two longer bolts go here and here. All the other shorter bolts go down and around the perimeter and up by the throttle body. And then we have the last short one that goes down on the bottom that we already removed. Now that we had that power steering pressure switch disconnected here, there's this other harness right here that we had disconnected from the intake earlier. And we now want to go ahead and disconnect it. So there's a little tab right here. You're going to push on that and separate the dark connector from the light gray connector. Let's go ahead and do that. Now this harness here, we're going to work up and out. Now we do have to make mention of our PCV valve, and that is going to be located behind the intake manifold. It is this unit right here. I'm using my pick to show you. On ours, it's a purple 90 degree and it has a plastic flex hose onto it. Now this here is going to be brittle, and probably about 95% of the time when you remove the intake, this is going to crack. It is virtually impossible to go ahead and pull this out or reach in there to disconnect it without it breaking. So you want to go ahead and highly recommended, order that up, get ready to replace that. So you're going to pull this back gently. And there it is. It just broke on us. It's typical, but it's down inside between the cylinder head and the intake. Very, very tough to get down into. So seeing how that's broken anyways, we're just going to wiggle this up and out. Set that intake aside. Now right here is the lower portion of the PCV, and this is the part that broke. So if we tip this up a little bit, you could normally access this here, but you have to remove the starter from the engine before you access this. We're going to pinch the two tabs. You're going to pinch and pull this right off. Let's go ahead and set the intake aside. I'm going to take this coolant hose. You can lift that up out of the way. You want to access this black collar right here. I'm going to use my hose pliers. Grab that collar, and we're literally just going to twist that counterclockwise. Once that collar comes off, we can twist the PCV valve and pull it up and out. Now right here is our knock sensor. It's a 10mm bolt holding that in place. We're going to use our 10mm ratchet, or socket and ratchet. Break that free, spin that bolt out. We're going to be reusing this bolt, so make sure you don't lose it. Pull that out, and we can go ahead and just pop that knock sensor off. Wire goes underneath that coolant tube. I'm going to use some spray solvent on a rag. Make sure you're wearing safety glasses when you start using chemicals. And you want to wipe off that area where the knock sensor goes. Make sure it's clean and free of any debris. Take your new knock sensor. Feed our connector down, out of the way. Line this up, get our bolt in. And when we removed the original one, the wire went up to the left, not to the right, so that is important. Next thing we need to do is we need to torque this down, and torquing this is critical. If you just tighten it and it's too tight or too loose, you're going to end up with a check engine light. Now you want to torque this down to 14.7 foot-pounds. Perfect. We want to go ahead and clean the cylinder head port where our intake is going to seat up against. Use some spray solvent on a rag. We want to get and wipe down the surface. We do want to make sure that we don't get anything inside the engine. If you do see a little bit there, just grab it and pull it out. But you do want to make sure that it is clean and free of any debris. And it has a nice mating surface for the gaskets to sit up against. Now we have our intake here. You want to pay attention to the gaskets. Now the gaskets are normally reusable and can be reused for several removals and installations. Now how do you tell if they're good or bad? Well, what you want to do is take your finger and you want to run it over the intake flange, and you want to see if that gasket sticks up beyond the plastic intake. If it does, well, that means that it's still good. But if you run your finger along here and it's completely flat and you cannot differentiate the difference between the gasket And the intake, well, it's time to replace them. Now, if they're in good shape and you're going to keep them in there, I just like to take some spray solvent on a rag, clean up around here, inspect the gaskets, take a look and see if there's any tears or anything like that on there. Make sure the surface is nice and clean, free of any debris, just as we did on the cylinder head side. Check that out. Our gaskets feel fantastic, so they're going to be good to reuse. All right, once we're satisfied with the surface here, we'll go ahead and continue on to the installation of everything. Let me get this down behind our coolant tube. Now you want to make sure when you're installing the PCV, the rubber O-ring is on there. I'm going to press it down in there and bring the locking collar over. You can bring that hose up while you get that locking collar installed. Now installing this collar here, there's going to be two little windows, and they're not even on each side. They're almost shaped maybe 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock windows on the lock collar. So you have to make sure that those are positioned properly. I took my hose pliers and I put them on top here, and I was able to push down and lock that into place. There's little tabs on either side that lock into those windows and capture that. You're going to hear it click in when it locks. Now I want to go ahead and lower this down into position. And you want to pay attention that your PCV goes onto this lower portion. And literally it just has to go on and it gets pushed on and it locks on. There's no twisting, pliers needed, anything like that. You're just going to push it on and it locks into place. Let's feed this down. Let's go ahead and take our intake. We're going to line this up. Line up our ports. Get that up in a position. I'm going to go ahead and get my upper right bolt in. I'm going to use this as a capture bolt. This is going to be the bolt that pretty much holds the intake into position. I'm not going to tighten it. That's it. Just going to hold it in place. Now the bottom portion of our PCV is right behind the starter here, so we're going to reach up and slide it into position. And we're going to use our long pry bar to get it right behind that PCV pipe. Pull out on the intake and get behind there, and you're going to go ahead and pry that on. It'll pop right on. You're going to hear and feel it. Now at this point here, we're going to go ahead and install our lower intake bolt. We're just going to get it started in a few threads. We're not going to tighten it, and then we're going to proceed up top. Just going to get a bolt up in here. You might have to lift that intake a little bit and maneuver it around for that bolt to line up. Spinning that bolt in now. Let's move up top and get those bolts started. I went ahead and put my bolt on my extension here. I'll feed that in. Bring that intake up. Now the plan here is just to get all of our bolts started a few threads, and then we're going to come back and snug them down and torque them appropriately. Now we're going to go ahead and get that center bolt in. This can be complicated. We are using a magnet. You can pop it on a diagonal like that if you're using a magnet. All you really want to do is get the bolt in the hole. All right, we have that one in. I'm now going to go ahead and install the longer bolts here that run through the metal shield. I'm using my magnet to get that up into place. I'm going to do the same over here. Push it in, slide the magnet up. And now come on back. And go ahead and get this lower bolt in here. Magnet comes in super handy when doing this. All right, I want to go ahead and run all these down. Just going to gently snug these down. We are not tightening these. Let's get and torque down our intake bolts to 13.2 foot-pounds. I'm going to start on the center bolts here and work my way out. And do the one over here to the left. These are the two holding that metal bracket. Then I'm going to come down to the center lower one. And I come over to the lower left. Grab our lower one here. And then we'll tighten up the one underneath the throttle body. Now on the bottom bolt here on the intake, I want to go ahead and snug this down. I'm going to go ahead and snug this. Now if you can, you want to go ahead and torque this down to 13.2 foot-pounds. I'm going to grab my knock sensor harness here, reach down and plug it in. Actually, this little hose here might be in the way a little bit. And twist off our expansion tube hose and just pop that off to the side for now. Give me a little bit of room here. Here it is. So that's connected. Let's go ahead and install the little pin here on the intake. Install your power steering pressure switch harness right here below the reservoir. I'm going to press it on, I'm going to feel it and hear it click in. Go ahead and install the expansion tank tube. Let's go ahead and grab our harness here, and we have that large gray connector that goes onto that sensor at the base of the intake, is just above the starter. Line that up, push that on. Let's follow that harness back up, and we're going to install all the little Christmas tree style retainers. Some of these are broken, some will work. There we go. I'm gonna bring this tube over. We have the blue lock on this, so remember, once this goes on, pull this blue clip all the way down to lock. Once this presses on, you have to push the blue lock up. Push it on, you can hear it, engage, and then lock. That's it. And then follow the line up, and don't forget to install it onto the little retainer here. Want to go ahead and install our vacuum port here. Line it up, just push it down, and just give it a little tug. That should lock into place. All right, let's reach down here and grab the connector for our throttle body. This is it right here. And we have the red lock tab. Don't forget, once this presses on, we need to press this up. For any reason, if this connector does not want to clip on, that tells me that the red lock tab is not fully in the downward unlocked position. So make sure that is all the way down. Line it up. Push it on, you're going to feel it engage, and then push up on the lock tab. The other thing is that if that's not locked in, that red lock tab will not push up and in. So make sure that's seated. Now let's transition right over to our intake tube here. Let's go ahead and get this set up. Gonna push this tube right on. Now when installing this here, you want to make sure that the tube is fully on. Make sure that the edge of the tube didn't roll inside or underneath. You need to make sure this tube is on all the way. So reach around, make sure it's seated on both of these. Let's go ahead and use our flathead screwdriver, and we can go ahead and snug down these hose clamps. Once you feel it bottom out, you're pretty good there. You don't want to make it too tight because you can damage the band clamp itself. We're good right there. Now we're going to install our vacuum hose on the rubber intake tube here. Good, line that up. Just push it on, you're going to feel it in here, lock into position. Install your transmission dipstick. We're going to take our dipstick, feed this down, line that up into the port here. All right, let's go ahead and work this in. So at this point here, our dipstick is seated into the base. We're now going to install our bolt on the intake. Now we're just going to go ahead and get this bolt started, and we'll be able to jump in there with our ratchet and snug that down. Now when this bolt bottoms out, just going to give it a tiny bit more. It doesn't have to be super tight, it just needs to be snug. It's holding the dipstick in place. Here it is. Just snug that down gently. And then we're going to go ahead and grab our oil dipstick, get that installed. Install a splash shield. Line up our mounting tabs and get our screws started. We're just going to continue this process all the way around the front and to the other side. Once they're all installed, we're going to come back and snug them all down. Now let's go ahead and snug everything down. And just want to snug these down gently. And just repeat this process right across. Now that we have all of our screws installed, we want to go ahead and install our 3 plastic push pins. Press that in, lock it in, and we're going to repeat this process for the other 2. Grab the wheel. Good, line up the wheel studs. Let's go ahead and install the lug nuts. Ideally, you want to get all these started by hand first. Then we'll go ahead and snug them down. When tightening these down, you want to go ahead and do it in a crisscross pattern. Now let's go ahead and torque down our lug nuts to 94 foot-pounds. Prefer to do this in a crisscross pattern. Now that we've completed the job, if you happen to have a check engine light on due to that knock sensor, you want to go ahead and use a scan tool, properly clear that code, and then go for a road test.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.